Hey y'all, Melissa with you today, and today's project is a bikini top. This has adjustable straps, a fun little front cutout, and a swimsuit hook on the back to put it on. Now this is based off of a free pattern that you can get on the Madeline blog. And I'm going to need you to visit the link in the description below, because in that post I'm going to have the information on where to get the pattern, the extra pieces you're going to need to cut, because this has a few extra pieces to make it a swimsuit, and the piece that you're going to have to modify to be able to use that pattern as a swimsuit. So visit that link and then meet me back here at the camera to see how to sew this up. Okay, let's talk materials. I'm using this pattern for the Barrett bralette that at the time of this filming is free, although this is not my pattern, so I can't guarantee that it always will be. Now I've made a couple of adjustments to the pattern. First of all, the instructions in the pattern are going to tell you to spray baste the center front cups together, the lining and the outer fabric, and then cut them together. Don't do that. Cut them separately. So you want two of the lining, two of the outer, cut separately. The next modification that I made is here on the back band. So you can see that the back band was originally a rectangle like this. And what you're going to want to do is on the folded edge, reduce that down to 1/2 inch. And then you want to square that off and then diagonally and then square it off on that end. So you're cutting off a triangle here. What this is going to do is it's going to make that bikini back go into the swimsuit hook at the back. And then we've added one piece. This is going to be the cover for the elastic band underneath. And you're going to want to cut this to your band size minus about 3 inches. Another note for this project, make sure that the fabric that you are using is at least 50% stretch widthwise and lengthwise. So you're using a 4-way stretch fabric. If it's polyester spandex, polyester lycra, nylon lycra, something like that, and it's labeled for swimwear or athletic use, it should have those properties. I'm also using swimwear elastic. I'm using both 3/8 inch wide elastic and 1/4 inch wide elastic. This is going to say cotton swimwear elastic on it, and it's because the cotton is not going to degrade the same way that other elastics would when it's exposed to things like heat, chlorine, salt water, all the places that you're going to wear a swimsuit. And then, as I mentioned earlier, I am using a swimsuit bra hook here. So it comes in a package, it looks like this, and we're going to use that as a closure on the back of this. So go ahead, get all of that cut out, and then let's start sewing. So the first step is going to be to place your lining pieces right sides together. We're going to sew down the center front, and same thing with the back, sew down the center front. However, as it says in the instructions, you do want to mark 1/4 inch down from the top and bottom and start and end your stitching there. Now I'm going to be sewing this with a stretch stitch, and I will add a link below for different types of stretch stitches that you can use, as well as a link to a post about tips and tricks for sewing with spandex. Okay, once you have the center front sewn, then the next step according to the pattern is going to be to add the side pieces here, and we're going to just do the same thing. The only difference is that we're completely sewing our lining and outer fabric or self fabric separately. Once you have sewed the center cups and the side cups together, this is what you will have. And then the next step is going to be to sew on that modified back band that we made. So what you want to do is open it up, and you want to match the wide edges to the wide edges of the cups and leave that little skinny strip in the middle there. Okay, once you have the two outer pieces sewn, we're going to start adding the elastic. So this is where you're going to need your 1/4 inch swimwear elastic. And what you want to do is you want to leave the lining piece right side out, and we're going to turn the outer piece, and then you want to match them up so that the lining is inside of the outer piece. And we're going to start with this front cup area. And so what you want to do is pin the lining and the outer piece together. And you can see this is where we left those 1/4 inch gaps. And those are because we're going to turn the elastic. So start from center front and pin these together with the seams open at center front. And I like to just pin straight through that seam. Okay, and then the rest of the cup will match up. And then what we're going to do is we're going to place the elastic on top of the outer cup. And we're going to pin all 3 of these things with their edges aligned. So it's a little bit tricky and you do need to be careful. I suggest using really long, really thin pins. And if you need to pin kind of diagonally to get through the elastic, that's fine. Just make sure that you pull those pins out before sewing over them, because if they're diagonal, you have a really good chance of hitting them. So you're matching up all of those raw edges, and then you are pinning. You're not stretching the elastic, you're not stretching the fabric. Now when you get to the curves here, this is the trickiest part, and sometimes it's easier to pin the 2 fabrics together first and then to pin the elastic on. So like right there, that got out of line. We're going to try that again. Now I pre-cut my elastic for demonstration purposes. I would actually do this right off the roll of elastic and then cut once I got to the end, because as you can see, now I've got a little extra that I need to cut off. So then what you're going to do is you're going to zigzag stitch right on top of this elastic, making sure all 3 of those edges are lined up. Okay, I've got the 2 center front cup elastics sewn in, and then I've gone ahead just for my own ease and pinned along all the edges to line up the underarm onto the back part of it. And then the next thing we need to do is we need to fold this so that we can find the exact center back of the top, and we're going to cut right there at center back. And then we're going to be adding 2 pieces of elastic to the armholes. So one's going to go here and one is going to go here. And we're just going to do this the exact same way we did this on the center front. Pin it in, zigzag it in. Make sure the elastic is on the same side as the outer fabric. Now once you get kind of past this straight-ish part of the cup, through this little bit of the curve here, you are going to want to stretch the elastic very, very slightly as you pin, and then that's going to cause a teeny bit of stretching as you sew. And what that's going to do is that's just going to make sure that everything is snug up in here so that you don't have cups gaping open on the sides. So just gently stretch the elastic a tiny bit and then pin. And once you're back to the flatter part, you don't need to stretch anymore. Alright, go ahead and stitch that with a zigzag stitch, and then repeat that on the other side. Now as you sew the part that you curved and stretched the elastic, you're going to need to stretch as you sew, just enough so that the elastic lays flat against the fabric. Don't stretch the fabric. Alright, once you've got that underarm and back band elastic sewn on, what we need to deal with are these little triangle cutouts under the bust here. So these are a little bit different than how we've done the elastic up to this point. What you're going to do is you are going to sew on the elastic to only the outer fabric. Don't sew the lining on this step or you won't be able to turn this right side out. So just like we did before, go ahead and pin that elastic on, and then you're going to zigzag stitch. Okay, we've got the elastic sewn under the bust and everywhere else we need before we turn this right side out. So let's go ahead and turn it. Now, the first things we're going to want to deal with are all the outer edges here of the longer pieces of elastic, and then we'll deal with this under piece here. So what you're going to want to do is you want to roll this elastic all the way to that edge, and then you're going to zigzag stitch right on top of that. Or if you have a cover stitch machine, which I do, I'm going to go ahead and cover stitch right on top of that. I'll come down to the center part of the front and then go back up on this side. And I'm going to do the same thing along the armhole and band edges here. That's going to make sure that elastic stays in there, is still able to stretch, but not able to roll. So let's go ahead and do that. So on the cover stitch machine, I am using a narrow 2-needle cover stitch, and then just make sure whether you're cover stitching or zigzagging that you pull the fabric nice and tight up against the elastic before stitching. Okay, once you've top stitched along the edges, this is what it's going to look like. So let's talk about how to deal with this inner edge here underneath the bust. You're actually going to need to hand fold up the lining and then fold the elastic and put those together and then pin. So once you get that pinned, it's going to look like this edge does, and it should be ready then for you to zigzag or cover stitch these two edges together. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and then we're going to talk about adding on the bottom band. So once you've got that top stitch, this is what it should look like. And the pattern gives a width for how wide this triangle should be. So on the size I'm making, it's supposed to be 2 inches wide here. So keep that in mind, and we are going to pin on the bottom band. Now if you're using a directional fabric, make sure that your print is facing up, and then what you want to do is you're going to pin the ends right sides together with the bikini top, and then you want the center front of the band kind of marked for yourself. So I'm just going to fold and pin, find it. And then you want to align that with the center here, keeping in mind how much space you should have between your cutout here. I want that center band aligned right to the center seam right there, pointing at it. And push these together until I'm at the correct measurement. And then I can go ahead and pin there. And then you're going to stitch just the one layer of the band right now across the bottom. Use a stretch stitch for this. Okay, once the band is sewn on, this is what it's going to look like. And then the next step is going to be to fold the band up and pin it together. Now you notice this edge between the triangles I folded down on the stitching line. I just stitched straight across when I was sewing that on. So we're going to pin here, and we're going to push these seam allowances inside and pin just barely over that stitching line. And this is going to create a casing for where we're going to put the elastic through. Now it's really important on these ends that you make sure that they're going to fit through your swimsuit hook. If they're wider, you're going to want to trim a little off that band and roll it more. Also important to note, on the front side, this upper part should be virtually nothing by the time it hits that seam. Okay, and then what you're going to do, and I like to do this from the right side, is you're going to zigzag stitch right along this seam. You want half of the zigzag to land on the band and half to end on the bathing suit, and that will help form the elastic casing where we're going to thread some of this 3/8 inch elastic underneath there. So hand crank your wheel to set your zigzag so that you are not going too far onto either side of that seam. When you get to this open area on the band, pick up your foot and slightly move the fabric over so that the zigzag is right on top of the band. And then when you get back onto where you've got a seam, shift your fabric again. Okay, y'all, we are getting close to being done here. So the next thing I'm going to need is a safety pin, and I'm going to use that with my elastic to thread this elastic through the bottom. So just feed it right through. Once you've got it back through the other end, go ahead and pull it so the elastic is just barely in the end there, and then pin it really well. Make sure you've gone through that elastic. And then you can pull the rest of it so that you don't have any sticking, so that you barely have some sticking out the other end as well. All right, pin that end as well. You can tug to distribute your elastic. So there's what the bottom band looks like. Now you're going to want to stitch across each of these ends now. Use a straight stitch, and that way none of that elastic will get pulled back through. And then we're going to talk about how to add the hook and how to do the straps. All right, after you've sewn across those ends, trim off any extra thread that was hanging off. And then on the inside here, on the left side, you're going to want to fold it into a loop, and we're going to zigzag over this edge. So I'm just going to pin this, and we'll go to the machine and do that in a second. And that is going to be the loop that my swimsuit hook goes through. Now, make sure you don't really want to use a lot of fabric to do this. In fact, I'm even going to do a little less here, because you don't want your loop to be so big that your hook can easily slip out. All right, that looks like a good amount to me. And then we're going to take the hook, and it goes on the other end. And same deal, you want to fold the minimum amount of fabric you need to be able to stitch without hitting that hook. And we're going to zigzag stitch right over that. If your machine is equipped with a self-leveling foot, this is a good thing to use here. And I will add another link about what those are. Okay, y'all, I've gone ahead, I've sewn those hooks onto the back, trimmed off extra threads. So now we're ready to deal with the straps. For the straps, you're going to need lingerie rings and sliders. And I made these straps. You could use bra elastic, but what I did was cut a 1 1/4 inch wide strip. I folded it right sides together, sewed a long tube, and turned that tube right side out. These are 18-inch long straps. And then what you're going to do to install them, you want to take the lingerie rings and you want to put them like that on each side of the top here, and then just like we did with the hook in the back, we want to zigzag that closed. So let's go ahead and do that, and then I'll show you how to insert the straps. Okay, so here's what it looks like once you've got the rings put on, and then we are going to put that aside and focus on the straps for a minute. So what you want to do is you want to feed the strap through the slider up and back down just like a belt buckle, just like that. And then you want to pull it close to the end and have just enough to fold down and stitch across that end there. Then what you're going to do, you are going to feed the strap in from the back side to the front side. Then you want to go back up and through the slider. And sometimes, especially when you're working with thicker fabrics, I like to use my point turner tool to help me just poke enough fabric through there to be able to pull it through. So pull it through, and then you have to poke it back down through. Make sure you're not twisting your strap as you do this. Okay, so there we go. So now that will be adjustable. And then to sew the strap onto the back, again, make sure you're not twisting it. And the pattern gives you a measurement that you want 5 inches between the straps. So since this hook is at center back, we want to go 2.5 inches over that way, 2.5 inches over that way. The measurement is different on different sizes, so make sure you check your size. But then all you're going to do is stitch the strap right onto there. Here's my ruler, and there's where I'm going to put my strap. So repeat this whole process with the other strap and you're done.